This is a fantasy tale based mainly on imagination, and it's in the first person. Beyond dreaming. I'd been ill for some time, so long I'd got used to being drug-laden. When first diagnosed, it had been a shock. I'd been robustly healthy as far back as my memory would take me. Never seen the inside of a hospital, apart from visiting my mother as a child and colleagues later in life. Now I'd become a regular at the hospital and also at the local pharmacy. A situation I'd had to resign myself to being in. After almost 8 years, I'd become strangely comfortable with the regular dosage, even to greeting each hot or cold sweat as part of the everyday fabric. Of course, the hormonal treatment had been particularly distressing. For the first 3 years or so, I'd functioned reasonably well and still felt male. But thereafter, gradually at first, and then increasingly rapidly, my maleness withered until peeing in the sitting position became normal. This particular day began in the usual mundane way. Wake, stretch as much as my atrophied muscles allowed. Sit up gingerly, using my legs as levers to avoid lower back damage. Shuffle to the bathroom to quickly sit and experience the only relief of the day. Then suddenly my mind was filled with images of past girlfriends, and there was my wife as she was when we first met. I was aware of a dull throb in my lower loins, and then realized I would certainly not need to be seated when I visited a loo anytime soon. What had caused this change? Was it the cod and chips I'd eaten the previous lunchtime? Perhaps the Persian biryani with 2 pints of beer the night before? It was a pleasure fitting into my jeans, I thought, as I finished dressing and bounded downstairs. Yes, bounded. I realized that physically I felt at least 30 years younger, and on looking at the image staring back at me from the hallway mirror, I looked at least that much younger. Grey replaced with dark brown, sagging chin now finely chiseled, features smooth and fresh, with a nice designer stubble there to see. I swaggered out the door into the high street. People peered as though knowing me, but not sure. I enjoyed the feeling of seeing bemusement on faces. Walking into my favourite cafe, I ordered a full English. I knew I could handle this amount of food now. The baristas stared astonishingly when they realized it's Ed, and their eyes showed their view of me had changed. Instead of the kind, benevolent look a youngster gives to grandpa, there was now the glint of interest most young women of this generation have when meeting available young men. I felt strangely uncomfortable. When I'd been young, girls were never as open and obvious with their thoughts and desires. This was a completely new experience. Then, as I sat in my usual place, a young lady asked if I minded her sharing my table. Not at all, I replied, and fell immediately into conversation, as though we'd known each other a lifetime. After a while, during which we'd both eaten heartily, she suggested we spent more time together. I leapt at this invitation as I was madly attracted to her. Suffice to say, we had a wonderful day in each other's company and fell into each other's arms that night. After fantastical lovemaking, I slept. When I awoke, I was alone. Resting on the pillow was a photo of a young woman I recognized as a school friend from years ago. There was writing on the back. I'd always wanted to know what it'd be like. Now I do. Dreams really do come true. I looked at my hands. They were back to an old man's. My face in the mirror sagged and lined as it had been a day or so before. I guess somehow her thoughts and desires had crossed the divide, and perhaps a guardian angel had done the rest. Was the whole episode just a dream? Throughout that day and several days afterwards, I searched the immediate area and then further afield. The staff in the cafe had thought afterwards that it had been my son and his partner playing a joke on my behalf, as I realized the affair had not been a dream after all. Eventually it occurred to me that I should attempt to make contact with my old home, perhaps even drive there. I might be able to gain some insight into what had happened to that girl I knew all those years ago. It suddenly dawned on me that the girl in the photo was French, on holiday at the time, and now I realized the woman I'd had such a passionate time with had a slight French accent. She had introduced herself as Danny, and I now recalled her name was Danielle. And after she'd returned home, we'd kept in touch by letter for a short time, but I'd been told she was critically ill and advised not to pursue our relationship further, as it would only end in heartache. I remembered her hometown had been Lille, and her father had been the chief of police there at that time. Should I travel there and visit the gendarmerie to try to find this lady? Then I recalled I may have kept those letters in an old box I used for memorabilia. It was now in my loft. The following morning I ventured up there, found the box, opened it, and after a while found the letters. And there was the address of the convent where she'd been studying at the time. I wrote and quite quickly received a reply from the Mother Superior. But the letter contained sad news. With regret, they had recently heard Danielle had passed away during her sleep on the very night I had woken in that amazingly rejuvenated state, and shortly before I had met her in the cafe. On further contact, I was able to find she had survived her illness and taken holy orders, eventually becoming the abbess of a local sanctuary not far from Lille. In her effects had been the letters I'd written her all those years ago, together with several faded photographs of us together and of myself and her separately, all dating from that short summertime we'd spent together. Although bearing sad feelings, I'm convinced now of love being all-powerful and capable of wondrous things. And one day soon, when my turn comes, she'll seek me out again, and our souls will entwine just as our bodies did that night. Yes, there's certainly a heaven waiting for those of us that believe.